Good evening. And here we are again. I'm back and I am delighted to be back. Now, it's an interesting piece I've chosen for tonight. It's by a man called Hur Lampman. And he was an American newspaper editor, essayist, short story writer, and poet. He was a long-time associate editor at the Oregonian in Portland, Oregon, and he served as Poet Laureate of Oregon from 1951 until his death in 1954. Now, this piece tonight is from a series of sketches first published in the Portland Oregonian. And it's entitled, At the End of the Car Line. She was raiding up her backyard, as she would have said. There's such a sight of work around her place at this time of year, and the old gray cat was now at her heels and now underfoot. The little old lady who lives at the end of the car line, sole alone with the old gray cat, sometimes asks herself how she ever endures him, with a catch at her throat and quick fear that one day he may not answer. Get away with you. Land of Goshen, but you are a nuisance. Then the old gray cat, he gave her such a look in return, he did, real wicked, and he arched his tail that looked so moth-eaten, and he humped his back and ran to the apple tree and up it like a kitten. And there he peered down at her, taunting her with great golden eyes of mockery. He knows well enough, the old rapscallion, that a body cannot climb trees. These stalks that are withered and dead are a little too coarse for the compost, and she will heap them here in the central garden and let them dry in the wind, and then put match to them on some day that is suitable. She said the phrase over again in her mind, quite primly, and then aloud to the old gray cat. On some day that is suitable, she said. He sprang high into air at a fluttering moth, and it wasn't his fault that he missed it. The little old lady, with her arms full of hollyhock stalks, stood there and admired him. Well a day. With so much to red up, there was no time for this. And here at the lip of the field, where the wild land comes down to her delphiniums, the joyous green-leaved briar of the creeping blackberry has crept. The little old lady set her lips firmly and shook her gray head so vigorously that wisps escaped this way and wisps through that, and she was put to some trouble to tuck them back again. She had meant only to indicate to the almost apologetic little invader that it must be thrust from her province again. The vine is real pretty, like she always told Henry, and the little small berries it has are the best of all blackberries for pies. But once you turn your back on it, bless you, it'll take the place in a season. She would have to be using her trowel. In the fall of the year, so she always says, a body can get half their spring work done if they've a mind to. You red up the whole place, front yard to back, and where the ground's right for it, who could resist spading a bit? If she turns the soil now, rebuking the grass and the weeds, it'll be in fine shape for spring gardening. Well, if she doesn't, land sakes, a body might as well try to garden one of those wild lots. Maybe the ground is a mite too wet, but it turns well enough, and better that it will have ever a chance to be spaded again this fall, she will venture. Some of the neighbors have told her that she shouldn't be doing her own spading, but that's half the pleasure of gardening. Even when Henry, when Henry was here, she had insisted on saving some of the best ground to spade for herself and without help. There wasn't a lazy bone in his body, but Henry never had patience with a spade. Give him some room to turn the bay team around, and Henry would be in there with the plow. Henry wasn't a gardener, so ran her thoughts, and it pleased her, though he was a farmer, like all his folks before him, a good farmer. But lots of folks that can farm aren't gardeners. Some few gardeners are men, she reflected, though not many of them. But all women are gardeners, whether they have gardens or haven't. A body can understand that readily enough, old gray cat. She had always been a gardener, she reflected, and to witness the spear of a plant coming through so eagerly into sunshine out of darkness, into life out of dream, is as dear to her now as when she was a girl and came west from Peoria. She believed, as she snipped the last mildewed stalk from the delphinium bed, that it would be better not only to spade the patch well and to give it lime, but even to lift the plants and divide them before she replaced them. For though it was here that the hen coop stood, a body is apt to be forgetting that that was 20 years ago, or such a matter, and that this china doorknob, for example, must once have been used as a nest egg. Where was she, old gray cat? Yes, well, yes. This patch needs a good working over. She felt the spade slither and grate again in the deep black soil of the delphinium bed where the chicken yard used to be. For the children must have their fresh eggs, and Henry was the great hand for them, too. But it didn't pay any longer in town, so everybody says. It would be a spike, she supposed, from the time they tore down the chicken house. There. No. Well, there, then. She brushed the moist earth from it with her fingers. It looked like it might be a jackknife. And it was one. Or rather, it had been one. Go away from her now, old gray cat. Go away. She has to see what it is, doesn't she? And you rubbing against her ankles all the while and fit to drive her distracted? Go away now. Her fingers trembled as they brushed at the clinging earth. Yes, there it was. It said I-O-O-F, and the letters scarcely were tarnished once she had rubbed them a bit. Well, it was Henry's all right, and she remembered the day when he lost it. The peddler took it, Henry always said, but the peddler hadn't. It must have fallen in the straw when they were cutting the twine on the red hen's legs. And you are here, old gray cat, and so is she. But the children are grown up and gone away. And there is Henry's lodge knife, as he always called it. And so the peddler didn't take it after all. Come here, old gray cat. She is sorry, she scolded. The wind has an edge to it now, and some stray drops are falling. It is time you and she went indoors. The china bowl of the Dresden shepherdess with the blue ribbon, hidden away on the topmost shelf of the cupboard, so that she must stand on her chair to reach it, came west with her folks from Peoria, old gray cat. And what if a body should break it? Get away from her now. It isn't so easy to get up and down anymore, but that's the safest place she can think of. And that is what the Dresden shepherdess always was used for, as far back as when the children were little. The little old lady who lives at the end of the car line got stiffly down from the chair, clasping the china bowl. It keeps the body busy all the time. And even then, the place never really is dusted as it should be. It was only a week ago that the shepherdess came down from the top shelf the last time, and there's a film of dust on her bonnet. Will you, Grey Cat, get out from under her feet? You seem to think you can help with your ridiculous purring and tail-waving. As she stepped to the floor, the china bowl gave a slurred, musical tinkle. What Henry always said was that money makes the pot boil, and that a man who wants a new scythe will mow with an old one, unless he is thrifty. And how many a time have the two of them together, as now she does sole alone, found the friendship of the Dresden shepherdess to stand them in good stead. They made a game of it then when the children were little, and when something was needed for the house, something extra. Henry used to laugh and say that they must ask the shepherdess for it, and they would take down the bowl. It stood where it does even then, well knowing how much it held in trust for them, but delighted to pour out the treasure and count. If it were not enough, like the time they wanted the new clock for the parlor, Henry would say that the Dresden shepherdess said no, and told them they must wait until they could afford it. For a man that is helped to money, Henry always said, may help himself to whatever he chooses. And the Dresden shepherdess helped them to money. But Henry was the most impulsive man, like all his mother's people, and he wouldn't always wait. Here on the rim of the bowl is the chip where he cast the dollar to make up enough for the clock. And suddenly and strangely, for a body never hears it usually, the still house was filled with its deliberate ticking. The little old lady who lives at the end of the car line tipped the china bowl, and respectfully, so that the coins slipped and slithered onto the blue tablecloth, the quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies. When they had fallen there, she caught some of them up in her hand and let them escape through her fingers. If the neighbors could see her now, they would think, she supposed, that she was a miser. And goodness, the minister! Dear Lord, if it is miserly to hoard one's money in a china bowl, and avarice to feel this eagerness for more, may it not be said for her that the old lawnmower will not cut any longer? For the camel cannot pass through the eye of the needle, it is true, but this is a very different matter, Lord, and she does need a new lawnmower. My gracious, the old one was new. They bought it at Mr. Pilkington's when the lawn was first planted. It is all wore out, and it rattles, and there's no use sharpening it anymore. The old lawnmower is all wore out. Amen. You are watching her with a cynical eye, old gray cat. Mind your business and go on washing your face. She marshaled them all in piles by themselves, according to their rank and degree. And in a company of lesser coins, the 25-cent piece is royalty. And even the dimes are dukes and duchesses. But there aren't many quarters. You have to be careful as can be and walk a chalk line and scrimp a little on this and save a little on that. And still it isn't often a body comes by a whole entire quarter at one time and can put it safely away. Then too, though she supposes this is an advantage, sometimes a body runs short and must go to the Dresden shepherdess for her assistance. And that sets the new lawnmower back quite a ways. Like the time she broke her glasses last summer. But for that, money in orderly piles look so neat and pleasing. Will you get down off the table? The first time the little old lady reckoned it, quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies, setting it down with a stub pencil, it came out $7.86. And she frowned. But when she counted it again to make sure and was extra careful, seemed like it was only $7.74. Some of it surely was gone. Now she simply mustn't get nervous, or she never would know. This time, she checked each pile twice as she counted, and with a sigh of relief, there was a whole dollar more. There was $8.86, and that was what she remembered from last week. If she could spare a dime and 4 pennies, here she searched through her purse, that would make just $9. $9. And that left only $3 more and 75 cents to save. If she is real careful, old gray cat, she won't have to mow the lawn more than once more with the old one before the new one comes out on delivery. It takes a body a long while to save as much as will buy a new lawnmower, and you have to give up a few things to help get it. But much never costs little, Henry always said. And money makes the mare go, Henry always said. But there is something else about it. Surely there is. That it is hard to find words for. To get things this way, as Henry and she well knew, is, and she sought for the word. Well, nicer, she said. But what she meant was that it was adventure. Go back to your shelf again, little shepherdess with the blue ribbon, who watches over the china bowl wherein the new lawnmower is shaping. It doesn't lack any more than the rubber-tired wheels now, and by the second cutting, there ought to be money enough. Can she afford it? The Dresden shepherdess will answer yes. And maybe, old gray cat, for a big order like that, they will send it out special delivery. She considered, as she paused on the back steps a moment, that already there was a touch of fall in the air, and she shook her head at the thought and said aloud, "Mercy!" Yet she was smiling. Though fleet as the swallows that used to nest in the eaves of the barn when Henry and she were farming, so fleet are the seasons. They fly past the body, they do. They're gone. The old gray cat looked up at her from the walk, and his eyes were widely golden with interest. His disreputable tailor, the old rascal, was waving. His tail was waving. "Come," said the little old lady who lives at the end of the car line, "and we shall pick the sweet peas." He leaned on her ankles. "Go away with you now." She vowed that she had never known such a cat, for he is a caution. And together they went into the garden. But she paused again at the trellis of knotted twine and old broomsticks and such, and stood there to look. It was as though she was thirsty and must drink. It was like that. Like the time of a summer long gone, they came over the hills by a deer trail and so down to the valley and found a blue spring by a brown rock. There isn't another flower that's quite equal to sweet peas in blossom. No, there isn't another. The scissors are those that she keeps for cutting sweet peas, and they wobble. Now Henry was the great hand for fixing such things as scissors. He had the knack of it, but these wobble. Why stare at her so, old gray cat? They've surely a right for to wobble a little. But they are the scissors she used when the children were small, and she did all her own sewing, though sometimes Mrs. Johnson, who was real good at it, helped with the fitting. The only scissors that do not wobble, that's true, are the scissors that snip away at the ears. Land of goodness. Then pursing her mouth as she does when she is cutting sweet peas, The little old lady who lives at the end of the car line began the harvest of beauty. She does not bunch them at first, blossom by blossom, as some will, but drops them all in a brown wicker basket. Snip, snip. You will find in the end it is tidier so. Yes, a basket. Time was, old gray cat, when you were a kitten, that Martha carried you in it. Oh, often, with your tail hanging over. But even then the children had learned to call it the sweet pea basket. It really was meant to take eggs to the grocery, but you know how it is. Things change. Eggs were 10 cents a dozen. Get away from that basket. Sometimes she doesn't know what she ever will do with him. Yes, sweet peas. Now, Henry, he never was partial to flowers, seemed like, though he'd never get tired of watching the grain. He just didn't have any fancy for flowers, excepting sweet peas. Come early spring, for they do best when they are in the ground early, seemed he always remembered it was time to plant for sweet peas. And come fall, he believed in saving the seed of them. You grow your own seed, Henry used always to say, and you'll know what you have. Seemed like he favored the blue sugar bowl that was his grandmother's, filled with sweet peas on the sitting room table. Yes, gray cat, sweet peas were his flowers. And snipping, she began to think of the generations of them, the begats and begats, without ever a break, until she was back in the time they bought the new washing machine, the first one, when the children were little. Snip, slowly. Snip, more slowly still. Yes, that was the year. Mercy sakes, it didn't seem possible, so it didn't, that these were the same flowers. If they were. And swiftly she turned, but there was only the sunshine on the steps and the old gray cat drowsing. Only these. Snip, snip. Nobody ever imagined such colors as these. Nobody did. For such colors never have been, save only in sweet peas they haven't. A waist of this one, perhaps, or maybe a dress, if there was money, to wear to a dance at the corners, with a brooch of rhinestones at the throat, and full sleeves, and a touch of lace, maybe. But in those times there weren't such dresses, and nobody dreamed of having them, not anybody. Ah, did they not? She reflected that dreams were often unguessed at the time, and after remembered, as we remember them from sleep, long after. This misty softness of blue, had she not dreamed it many the time? It is dream. Snip. This was foolishness, as she well knew, and she shook it away with decision until her head tossed. Now then, resolutely, snip, snip. This much is certain as can be, that nobody she knows ever manages somehow to grow such sweet peas as hers. And they have fertilizers, too. And they buy at the seed store. And they have seed that costs more than she ever could afford. But they haven't such sweet peas as hers. You take the stems of them. In all your born days, did you ever see such stems on sweet peas? When stems are as long as these are, there's never a mite of trouble in fixing them so they look real nice in a bowl or a vase. But when the stems are stingy, as hers never are, people have dreadful times. Snip. So they do. She came to the end of the row, where she helped a tendril to grip the twine, and the task was at an end then. The sweet peas were all picked, for if a body picks them, they bloom the longer, And that is part of the secret. You simply must keep them picked. Yet here and there on the vine she had left a stray blossom, crimson or purple or white, to leave something of color. For if she should take quite the last of them, her heart would misgive her. It wouldn't seem right. So it wouldn't. Then she bent her face to the basket, heaped with the soft sweetness of them, and breathed of their fullness. It took her back quite a ways, like always. Land of goodness. They went into the kitchen together, out at the end of the car line, and the old gray cat almost tripped her. He's a caution. She doesn't know how she abides him. And she took down the blue sugar bowl from the cupboard and hummed Beulah Land while she fixed them. Now, fluff them out a mite. Straighten this one. There. There isn't anything quite so satisfactory as a blue bowl of sweet peas. And that is At the End of the Car Line by Hur Lampman. I find it, I don't know what to say, delicious. It's another time, another place, and, well, supply the words. I can't. I hope you've enjoyed it, my dears. And that is it for Tales and Cocktails for tonight. And I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at 6 o'clock. Good night, all.